What is up, Generals? We are back with Ultimate General Civil War. This is the Major General Union Let's Play, and I, as always, am Fiasco. We are getting ready for the Battle of Stones River. In this battle, we are going to be tasked with defending a line against pretty heavy Confederate attack. To that end, we have prepared the army a little bit. Although, would like to bump up some of these units. So, all right. So, units have been brought up to their usual fighting strength of 1,400, with the exception of some of the quote-unquote new pattern brigades in Third Corps, who are at the 1,500 man fighting strength. However, as you have seen or noticed, I have spent in a great deal of money repairing the damage of Fredericksburg to the army. I mean, I'm gonna be honest, that's where a lot of this cash ended up going is keeping these units at two stars. As you can see, I took a lot of them down to basically, if I had one more rookie recruit, I would have lost the second trait, and then the remainder was put into veterans, which is a significant portion why I am now putting as much of my resources towards the training attribute as possible. More and more and more, it is going to cost me significant amounts of money to keep the army in a veteran state, especially as the prevalence of two-star units continues to increase. Organization has been broken from the traditional TO and E associated with the brigade model, the Corps model, given the nature of the battle. So with Stones River, a significant portion of my force has to defend against this left hook, and when I've played it in the past, they put a lot of effort into turning my flank, and so I've put all of my light infantry in I Corps, maneuvering some of the, I had to slot away 2 infantry and I think 1 artillery to make that fit. I've slotted them into 2 Corps, who are probably going to be on the left, I suppose, where I can get away with having more artillery. 3 Corps has been brought up to fighting strength, but for the most part doesn't really have a lot of the, what I will term, finesse units associated with them. Let's take a look at the army before I jump in, and then instead of having kind of a larger preamble, I'm just going to jump into the fight. So artillery is hanging out in the 12 to 14 range. Not that way. That's not what I wanted to do. There. Artillery is hanging out in the 12 to 14 range. Skirmishers are hanging out in the 300 to 375 range, depending on, what the commanders can handle and how many guns and everything else. I just don't have the money to throw around like I would like. So financially speaking, the army is not in a great place. In terms of training, leadership, equipment, and everything else, the army is in a phenomenal place. So dollars don't do me anything on the battlefield, and as a result, I have no problem spending them. We have our first naturally grown 3-star unit, 1st Dragoon. Was led by a colonel. I realized that the colonel had a little bit too low of a command stat to keep up with the efficiency of the unit, and I had W. Kurzanowski here. We'll go ahead and say his name is Walter. So I threw Walt in command of 1st Dragoons. They picked up their 3rd star, despite the fact that I have been using my dragoons as sort of or my cavalry as kind of a big melee swarm of late. I opted to give them the mounted infantry trait. These carbines are very excellent. Eventually they're going to get their hands on Spencers, and the trait that I thought was most interesting or useful was the cover plus 25% bonus associated with the unit. Now, I don't know if that triggers exclusively when they're dismounted or not, but I assume it to be true across the board. Cover plus 25% is a significant damage reduction for the unit. Their stats are also excellent. This is a monster unit. They're excellent in melee. They've got great stamina. They've already got that charge damage bonus. The other trait, the melee trait, would have given them a further 25% charge bonus damage, which would make them absolutely devastating on the charge. And I can appreciate what that might mean. However, this is a very general purpose unit. The Dragoons are intended to be kind of a general purpose jack of all trades, which does unfortunately mean master of none. They're going to be able to get around pretty quick. And they're going to have good stats across the board, and their lesser experienced brethren, 2nd Dragoon, are developing along more or less the same lines. 5th and 6th Dragoons are obviously a significantly less well-experienced version of the same kind of idea, and that's basically it. I've gone through and I found all of the units that I talked about in my previous videos as being like guard status, the heroes of a certain battle or whatever. So the Gaines Rock Brigade used to be 6th Infantry. Parker's Guards were 18th. They held up the line pretty well in Parker's Crossroads. And unfortunately, it was just too expensive to keep on bumping up their number. And I upgraded them. So instead of bumping them to 1,400 and throwing just all kinds of cash at them, after equipping the Iron Brigade and the Rock of Shiloh with 1861s, I had enough, a little over 1,000 left over, so I threw them in the Parker's Guards Brigade. Gave them the 1861. So I've used just about every 1861 I've got access to, and the Army's doing well. 3 Corps is a predominance of our longer range artillery, so the artillery here is intended to throw off the initial Confederate attack. This corps is designed essentially to rebuff a Confederate thrust. This corps is designed to destroy the Confederacy from range, while I have that bunker position, we'll call it, just shy of in the middle of the battlefield. And then the reserve corps is, I don't know, they're going to just fill in the gaps and do whatever they do. But there's a large number of my longer range weapons in 3 Corps who are intended to hopefully shell the enemy from afar. And we'll just kind of see how that shakes out. All right, so without further ado, let's keep the preamble to a minimum here. I realize we're already going on, I don't know, just shy 8 minutes or so. The general plan is essentially, we'll see how this shakes out, to repulse the attack here and accept their attack here, while utilizing the forces in this region that hopefully, and I'm fingers crossing here, 1st Corps, 2nd Corps, 3rd Corps, hopefully shatter the attackers in this general region and start kind of taking this fishhook and anchoring on this point, if the fighting is still here or further north, depending on where the fighting goes, anchoring here, pushing to this island, and then pushing to this island. And like at that point in time, I don't really know if I can say I have a plan. But I have generally noted in the past that this portion of the fighting in here gets pretty intense, and I'd like to have artillery to sort of crossfire with the attacking Confederates. I don't know where they spawn. I have a dream, I suppose, of occupying this position, but that's an extreme stretch goal. So for me, like this, I'm going to call occupying this position and using artillery to make attacking my center nearly impossible. I'm going to call that, victory. And then I need to consider myself like hold there basically to sort of defend that river crossing. And then this gets turned into a bunker as well. But we'll see how it goes. I'm going to go ahead and turn off the mic, play the battle, and I will dub over post-battle commentary when we get back to it, because you're not going to want to see me play this thing in slow-mo in real time. So I'll do what I do, speed it up 1.5 or 2 times, and then dub over it. I will see you on the other side. This is Fiasco signing out for the time being. Just kidding. All right, so they do a good job of giving us kind of an opening on this battle. So we're coming in from Nashville. We're going to meet General Bragg's army. This is apparently the lead up to the Battle of Murfreesboro, or this is the Battle of Murfreesboro. Not obviously as famous as Gettysburg or anything like it, but I've given every indication that this was actually a pretty significant battle. Securing the small town will not only have a strong symbolic impact, but will also allow us to do the things deeper into Tennessee. That all makes a great deal of sense. And we're going to pan over. All right, so the Confederates are Mya, and you can even see some of the trench works there. And then we're going to end up kind of occupying this position. And the dream is that they bounce off of us, essentially. This is my bastion around the kind of the anchor around which I'm going to be. No, this is the fulcrum. Let me learn English. This is the fulcrum around my hope is that the Union Army will eventually be able to sort of rotate. Bragg is not willing to allow us to march deeper into Tennessee, which makes sense. He waits for us at the banks of the Stones River. Cool. So this is a frontal attack would be suicidal. That is correct. Be wiser to sort of push our left flank and take the heights west of the town. Blah, 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 blah. Cavalry is patrolling the area, and we will know if the ground is suitable to attack. I feel like that's not what actually happens. I think that they attack us. Yeah, here's the fishhook I was talking about. Another viable option would be to attack their left. We don't know how many dudes are in the area. Yeah, that's true. So this is the wide open position I was talking about. And when I have, so full disclosure, the last time I played this, it was Brigadier General. So, I don't. This is a very different enemy than the Brigadier General version of the Confederate Army. So we shall see essentially how this goes. This is, without a doubt, one of my favorite battles in the game because look at this battlefield. It's so huge and so, the terrain is kind of varied and you have a lot of open terrain to play with and you get 3 corps to futz around with, and the Confederates have 70 some odd thousand as well. We're establishing our headquarters at Nashville Pike, this sort of elevated position. You can see the trench works are already there. I suppose the developers didn't have the ability to sort of phase the battlefield because my understanding is that the trench works wouldn't be here on day one. We would have to add them overnight, but they can't have day 1, day 2 versions of a battlefield. Tomorrow morning, we'll be ready to do the thing, decide some stuff. But wait. Oh no, our dudes are having breakfast and we're under surprise attack. Oh gosh. Okay, so the enemy's attacking, and if I remember correctly, based on Brigadier General, this is a pretty ferocious attack. I have to expect that the Major General version is going to be pretty intense. So, from me to you, let's hold on to our butts and see how this goes. Now I'm turning off the mic. I'll see you on the other side. Fiasco out. And so they're also giving us a little bit of a warning to watch ourselves in the north. You're given 2 blocks of 10 brigades to deploy. And what I do here is I sort of support the southern portion of the fishhook. I guess maybe you don't get 10 brigades. I don't know. You get 2 forces. I found myself frequently sitting, so you get 10 and 6. That's right. I was like, yeah, you get 2 of 10. Why do I have 4 left over just sitting around? So this is why I think that I would have arranged the divisions a bit differently, or the corps a bit differently, because 4th Division doesn't really partake in the opening phase of the battle. So I deploy the forces such that everything in that northern block can redeploy ASAP to support in the defensive efforts in the south. We're also going to get some reinforcements from the Reserve Corps relatively early on. So the addition of what I will term lower quality infantry is helpful because they can stand at a place in the line. But because I've been working to keep the development of experience relatively uniform across the army, yes, they're not 2-star super vets, but they are, perfectly capable infantry, and that's I've kind of gone back and watched some of my old content, and I realized I talked a great deal about the supposed, overarching strategy of building the army, but not really Recently, I've just been giving you kind of a blow-by-blow of whatever I'm doing on the battlefield and then getting off into some random tangent about a moment in history or the organization of artillery brigades larger than battalion and whatnot. Briefly, what's going on here is the early waves of the Confederate attack are beginning to hit, and look at that force, beginning to hit the fish hook to the south. The defensive position up north is not hit nearly as hard. I think there's a grand total of 3 or 4 brigades that directly attempt to attack the northern block of woods. The remainder attempt to attack the intersection between the two, and then, as you can see, the better part of 2 divisions or more is hitting in the fish hook down in the south. The swarm of sniper skirms is keeping everything on my extreme right, although it is the left of the screen. On my extreme right are holding back 2 brigades, maybe 3 of cavalry, and then several units of skirmishers. They perform beautifully. I am so beyond over the moon happy with the performance of the sniper skirmishers in the course of this battle. And the line infantry do their job. They just kind of brawl it out. Cannon normally shine on my battles, and they got plenty of kills. But this is not one of the battlefields where my preference for close and medium range artillery has a chance to shine, I think. And so they've done good work, and all of them racked up crazy butcher's bills and whatnot and all that kind of stuff. But at the same time, I think the real hero of this battlefield is probably the line infantry. Like, some of these battles I say, like, oh, I'd be dead if it wasn't for the cannons. But in this particular fight, it's almost certainly the case of either the light infantry or the line, and probably the line, really saving my bacon, because they're being tasked to hold a stupendous amount of territory. And it's only through kind of creative use of skirmishers and everything else and just kind of cycle falling back that I'm able to do so. It to my perception on the battlefield, it was absolutely vital in the early phase that I held control of the fishhook. There was no room for debate in terms of the possibility of a fallback maneuver. There are those blocks of trees to the north of the screen, which would be kind of a right oblique angle to the defensive position I'm required to hold. Like, I don't think that if I lose the flag down here, it's really all that big a deal. However, I had every desire to outflank the Confederate position, and that meant grinding down all of this attack force, all of it, and then taking what is right now the defensive army holding up the Confederates, and then turning it into an attacking force. And there's no way I'm going to do that if I fall back to these trees up here in the north, and then I try and push back and take the fishhook again. So I need the Confederates to be attacking from open territory so that I can inflict disproportionate casualties upon them. And the infantry units holding this terrain really, really pay for that strategy. They're the ones that make it possible through their fighting. And unfortunately, they're also the ones that make it possible through eating the brunt of the Confederate attack. Now, that said, messy though this portion of the fighting is, I think it goes otherwise exceptionally well. This is a tough battle. It's one of my favorites in the campaign. It is equally fun from the Union and the Confederate perspective. It's a bit of a pain in the ass from the Confederate perspective because you are tasked with essentially attacking. I mean, you're the Union and Confederate playthroughs are identical. And by this point, I think you're well past the point where the AI is giving you free troops to like throw away. So you just have to use your own guys to do it. And it gets hard. Honestly, it's hard. It's hard from the Confederate perspective. So, there's not like a lot of really interesting or exciting things to talk about here. I'm grinding it out. I'm fighting on the tree line or a little bit behind it. The unit of 24 pounders that's immediately behind the infantry line takes a volley of infantry, and I'm pretty sure I lose like 2 guns in the process. So that's super duper not ideal, as you may imagine. The sniper skirmishers are extending my line from the extreme right. They're slowly anchoring around and standing in a place where they can provide enfilade fire into all of that Confederate infantry, which is a bunch of 2-star units pressing into the right or southern underbelly of the entire Union position. And so when those skirmishers get online, their offensive more or less falls apart. Getting all of that online and in position and shutting the cavalry down so that I can move up to this position, all of my posturing up until now has basically been for this. Has basically been so that I can place these skirmishers on the extreme Confederate flank and just pour fire down the sides of their units and just cause all kinds of, untold havoc. But it has been a messy, messy fight to get there. And that's one of the things that I kind of really, really like about this battle is they're really making me work for it. And I never like to see my dudes take losses, right? Like I spend so much time building this army and lovingly crafting these units and whatnot. Like I actually do kind of like I don't like taking the casualties, but at the same time, it gets kind of boring if if the enemy just kind of rolls over, right? So the turnaround is that like, okay, like it's more interesting even if I'm like, oh, the numbers are getting small and all that kind of stuff. So early on in this video series, I talked about what I'm terming my mixed order playthrough. And so you've seen, I've got like 10 people who watch my videos in any kind of regularity, and all of them are content creators to my knowledge. So you've seen Big Army. If you're watching a Union campaign, you've seen Big Army, something Compass like knocked out of the park with Big Army. And you've seen, I don't even know what to call it. Like Spectrum, when he plays, it's like watching Delta Force deployed. It's like watching Navy SEALs deployed to the Civil War. Like it's just nuts, the kind of nonsense that you can pull off with these itty bitty units, and then like embedding them into larger brigades of what we'll call chaff and that kind of stuff. It's very, very impressive. It really, really is. Just kind of a joy to watch that army work. And mixed order is this playthrough. It's what you've watched me do, and I'm the big core proponent of mixed order is keeping the experiential development of the army as even as possible and having the whole thing grow in a kind of uniform manner. A prevalence for equipment over dudes. So I would rather bring 1,200 man brigades, but they have good rifles, rather than having to bring 2,500 man brigades, but they've got farmers or Springfield 42s and that kind of thing. The thought process that goes into why do I want to play the mixed order strategy is a little bit of it is kind of a desire to sort of role play historically. Historically, the Union just kind of threw whatever they could get onto the battlefield, and unit sizes were all the hell over the place. But interestingly, so I'm working in a data sciences degree for my graduate program, and in one of those, I'm doing a statistical programming class where I'm learning a database, or I'm learning R, and doing some statistical analysis, and I'm able to pick kind of whatever data set I'd like to work from. And one of the data sets I found, which unfortunately didn't meet the qualifications for the class, but I still dug through it for fun anyway. One of the data sets I found looked at average brigade sizes in the Confederacy and the Union and so forth and so on. And I was surprised that this game isn't actually that far off from the average brigade sizes. Now there are outliers. There are outliers that grew to like 6,000, 5,000 man brigades, but they're pretty rare. I was surprised, and it's been a minute since I've looked at that data set because I've been living and breathing the other data set, which is more about driver data, just because it had enough observations for the purposes of the class. It's not related to the video. I apologize for getting off topic. The mixed order strategy came from the perspective of, generally speaking, especially in the United States Army, there has been a preference for jack of all trades uniformity. So, or not like uniformity, basically. Like, we don't really have as a society a tradition that goes back to these super duper elite units. I mean, there's special forces and Delta and Rangers and whatnot, and they're out there. But take a look at the utilization of the 101st after D-Day was over. Like, after the landings were over, they were just really good infantry. You know, they were supported by tanks and all that kind of stuff and whatever, but, you know, they were just utilized like just regular infantry. They were another unit in the line, another division to be rotated in and out, into and out of certain positions. And I don't think that that's a particularly unique American trait or anything. I'm not going to try and pretend like we've got the monopoly on the concept of uniformity across the military, but we have frequently been a quality of equipment over, you know, much of anything else kind of military. Not to the point of like meme Russians, right, where you take like the Stalingrad. One man has a rifle, one man has bullets. You just figure it out. All right, so into the game really quick. We're going into phase 2 of the battle. And what's nifty about phase 2 is just they dump a lot of reinforcements right on you, which is kind of weird. I get my troops set up in the bunker, which is what I'm calling this position up here. You see Fiasco MG and his second corps boys getting ready to repulse. Just their position's never seriously threatened. And as a play note, I feel like I did not do a good job utilizing the reinforcements that eventually joined the bunker as using the bunker as a safe place to launch offensive operations from. I should have supported my eventual thrust up the Confederate flank with troops from the bunker, and I didn't, and that cost me more casualties and frankly more time than I would have liked. I think it may have also cost me fewer casualties inflicted on the Confederates, but anyway, so mixed order. What do I think is like American about it? We don't have grenadiers. We don't have guards infantry. We don't have the house guards, the life guards. We don't have the old guard, the young guard, all that kind of nonsense. We have individual regiments and brigades divisions who are steeped in lore because of the activities and actions of their forebears, and that's absolutely something that they should earn 100%. Like, it's part of what their combat role is and whatnot. But there are not elite house guard formations that have a special or different or unique role on the battlefield where it's like, oh, you know, whenever Napoleon commits the old guard, you know he's confident of victory, or they're the ones that are going to make it work, you know, until Waterloo. It's never one of those things like where people are like, oh shit, here comes, you know, 10th Mountain, or, you know, whatever. Like they're very competent. 10th Mountain, I had the privilege of 10th Mountain was in command of my AO when I was downrange, and they were on it and they were great. But they got replaced by 2nd Infantry, who were also on it and who were also great. And that's kind of what I'm getting at. And that was the motivation for mixed order, is how do I keep the quality of my equipment up, and how do I keep the quality of my training as even as possible, and still build a usable army. And the central thesis as to why I would even want to do that is the thought experiment is essentially, then I can drop any unit anywhere in the line and expect that it will perform. Some will do better, some will do worse. There's no question about that. I've got 2-star units. They're going to outperform my 1-star units. Okay, fine, sure, absolutely. But I'm terrible at micro and like StarCraft, where if you have your swarm of medics, marines, and siege tanks and whatnot, and they're all in a big blob, and like the best players in the world have actions per minute, measured in like shitloads, and they have their marines in the right place, and they have their medics in the right place, and their whatever, all that kind of thing. I'm not good at that stuff. I'm just not good at it, and I frankly don't really even enjoy it. Like, I don't enjoy that level of granularity. I want, honestly, to take a step back and look at the whole battlefield from an operational perspective and say, hey, like, it's why I'm kind of interested in the Scourge of War games. I haven't played them yet, but I hear that this is something you can do in those kind of games. I would love to simply be able to write a letter to like Fiasco MG, and be like, hey, defend this bunker, and then write a letter to whoever the general is down there, McClellan probably. Write a letter to McClellan like, hey, repulse the attack and then launch a flanking maneuver and link up with Fiasco's troops and, meet up here and then block the Confederate advance. Just kind of watch it go. Like, that's the way that I would like to play these games, and I know that I can't because obviously the whole point of this genre of game is that you're the battlefield commander, is to make big decisions and then trust like General Ellis, if I'm reading that name correctly, or trust the commander of 3rd Light Infantry, whoever, general, I think, as well. Trust that general to see to the disposition of his soldiers. And like, I can do this in Hearts of Iron. It's kind of why I like that game too. Where, I just, like, for me, the big decisions is like committing an extra 2,000 troops or an extra 2 divisions to one front versus another, or like, do I take these factories offline now, even though it'll mean, like, let's say it's 1939, do I keep producing a 1936 era rifle because my scales or efficiency of scale or economies of scale have reached the point where I'm churning them out enough that I can keep up with the demands of the front? Or do I take a few factories offline and start building a newer 1939 or theoretically even because a 1941 era rifle or something that might take me produce an efficiency hit in terms of production, but are the gains in efficiency of that weapon worth it in terms of the loss of production for the purposes of battlefield efficiency, manpower, force pool preservation, lives preserved, that kind of thing. So it's now that can go too far the other direction if you let it, where Hearts of Iron is just like you draw an arrow from Germany to Moscow and then the army and then the game figures it out for you. Now it has been patched to the point where it is now a meaningfully complex decision to plan that operation, which is great. I love it. I'm a huge fan of that game too. For all the reasons that you would imagine if you've watched this series, given how much I lose my mind and nerd out about the camp screen. So back to the battle, because I'm wildly off topic, which is the thing. I massively overcommit these troops up here to operations in the south. It does not occur to me, and it should have, that Confederate troops attack from the north in this phase of the fight. I totally slipped my mind. I didn't think about it. It's just not a thing that occurred to me at all. And so I commit all these troops that are supposed to defend the river crossings. I commit them to join the battle in the center, repulse the attackers, whatever, with maybe an intention of trying to encircle and attack the Confederate flag. I don't know if they're actually standing on a flag or not, but where they are currently dug in and attacking from, wherever that is, I had the thought process of trying to encircle and attack that position. So what I am doing on the battlefield with the Southern Arm is that they have now repulsed all the attackers, and the Confederate attack in the south is now on the run, and the commander is now essentially attempting to preserve as much of his forces as he can, and that's reasonable. Absolutely, he's all the inputs and data that he's been given suggests that he's been outfought, outmaneuvered, and outgunned, and he needs to back up and preserve his command, or fold it under Bragg or whoever. I think it's Bragg up north. He needs to fold it under the commander there, and then hopefully they can make an attack upon my center practical, because the flank is unattackable, unassailable, and that's reasonable. And I am pressing my luck, aggressively moving my troops forward in order to chase and run him down. A number of them are at or near the point of exhaustion, and that's why I think I'm pressing my luck to attack, because I should just be like letting them rest, or I should be using different troops to press the attack, or I should be, there's a bunch of things I should be doing that I'm not doing right now, and it is because I smell blood in the water. I see this whole division plus element here that could be scooped up and gunned down. And because they're too busy just barely coming out of morale shock or possibly even routing territory, there's so many like lightly flashing flags there. My read on the situation here is they are not going to be able to put up a meaningful fight, even if they do rally, because they're going to be they're going to be in the 50s in morale percent, and they're going to be putting out ineffective fire or inefficient fire. And so I press my troops way, way hard. And essentially it's, and then I get stupid and I don't pay attention, and that battery of artillery just walks basically right into, Confederate position. This is why I play a lot of these larger battles on slow-mo and then record it for you at double time, or maybe even I think I did Fredericksburg at 2.5x because it was just such a long slog of a fight. It's really easy for me to lose track of what's going on. I do not keep track of a shitload of elements like this really well. I don't do it. I have the same problem when I'm trying to play Steel Division, which is a game that I think I should love. And I just don't. Conceptually, I love everything about what that game is trying to do, but it is so micro-intensive. I am atrocious at it. Atrocious, terrible. Same with Wargame. I really, really am terrible at Wargame. That's why when I played it, I liked to play the larger games like Team Play, and I would play like Polish Armored and just swarm the field with ZSUs and T-72s or whatever, and it just, like an M1 would outgun me, no questions asked, but we would play and somebody would have a bunch of Heinz and Russian infantry and smoke from artillery or whatever to support the attack, and then I would swarm with my tank horde, and a couple of javelins would knock out a tank here, and there'd be a tank destroyer somewhere else, and they would gun it down over there and that kind of thing. But there's like 6 more where that one came from, comrade. And so the point is I'm not good at micro. And these larger battles are always kind of a chore for me just to keep up with, because it's not that I forget about a flank. I'm deeply aware of what's going on. I forget that I need to do something in a certain part of the battlefield because I'm busy thinking about something else in a different part of the battlefield, or I'm worried about down here. Now I'm giving I Corps a chance to rest. I'm merging units that have taken too many casualties, which is basically all of them. This is my biggest self-complaint for this battle, is that these guys are all sitting at barely any casualties up here. The units have taken 100, 200 maybe losses, and then there's these units down here that have been mauled, and they're at 50% casualty rate, or they're they're just huge losses. And so I'm merging these units and then giving them a chance to rest up. And I have the supply wagon and I'm rearming them. And the supply wagon's, fine because we've discovered now that the way the code is put together, bullets are basically free. I mean, not really, but they may as well be. So what I do poorly up here is I now realize they come across the river. So I'm desperately trying to throw together a defense that can pin them into the water. And then also protect my center because I have a couple of dudes in the far rear guarding that back flag because that's a critical objective to my knowledge. If you lose it, you lose the battle. So I don't want a random cav unit or a random skirmisher unit or something to just kind of win this battle for a bunch of bullshit reasons. You lost the battle and inflicted 75,000 Confederate casualties and I don't want that to happen. So, I'm like, oh shit. So when I said earlier I overcommitted to the south and undercommitted to the north, this is basically those hens coming to roost. I lose a brigadier general, which sucks. I don't even know where I lost him. Fortunately now I think brigadier generals are kind of common enough that I'm not that worried about it, but it's still not great. And probably it's up here because this is the only part of the line that's really actively engaged. We managed to get a volley off on this general and I take him out, which is pretty fantastic. And that does sort of save the day up north because when these units do start to falter and fall back across the water, it takes them that much longer to kind of get their shit together and then try and push up again and that kind of deal. So, situation's pretty touch and go. And let's get back to sort of the meta discussion about mixed order. So I really like the way that this army plays. I think that you go back and you look at what do I say at the end of it? I talk about, I have a couple of sections that I probably should write down and make notes to do. But let me take a look. We're at, okay, so a little bit left. I talk about, what did I learn in the campaign leading up to this battle? What did I learn from this battle? And what are my thoughts about, how the army is performing, how the army performed, et cetera, so forth and so on. So here's this weird cav unit, charging through my brigade to get to somebody else. And then, we don't even shoot them on the way over, and I don't even know what's going on. We wipe them though. One brigade or the other figures out there's cavalry in front of them, and then we just take them out. So I am ecstatic. I am ecstatic with mixed order. I don't think it's performing any better by any stretch of the imagination than an elite army would. I have seen the playthroughs of really the people I watch the most are Something, Compass, and Spectrum. And I've seen them do infinitely better than I do on these battles. I mean, not orders of magnitude better, but better. Every single time I do one of these fights, I take more casualties than Compass did, and I inflict about the same or fewer. I feel like I had pretty close parity in terms of casualties inflicted for a while there, but I think I'm falling behind the curve, and that's because I'm not aggressive enough in this particular fight. But again, this isn't really like a dick measuring contest. This is just kind of, I'm using them, the other streamers, as kind of a benchmark. Am I doing okay? And one thing that I really, really dig about mixed order is that 1-star infantry is relatively cheap to replace. And if I bring in rookies to supplement them, 1-star units don't lose a whole lot of their expertise. Now I need to follow these guys back. This is 35th Infantry, relatively green junior brigade. It occurs to me as well that I have been naming them number infantry, number artillery, number cavalry or dragoon. And that would be less indicative of a brigade and more indicative of a battalion or regiment. And I should be naming these like 4th Brigade, 6th Division or something. But I don't know. I think that this is fine. 16th Infantry Brigade suggests that it's an independent brigade or something. I find fascinating, like reading about the composition of brigades and divisions and so forth and so on. Like some stuck together and some were independent and some were ad hoc and some were, it's very, very cool how that all got, like they got reshuffled and rejuggled. Individual regiments within a brigade got juggled around to make sure that brigades were all relatively similar in size, which makes a lot of sense. It's fascinating to read about. And I don't know, this particular conflict in this era is just fascinating for so many reasons that are totally disparate. Anyway, what I like about mixed order, how this army's performing, I can drop any unit pretty much anywhere and expect it to carry whatever burden I place upon it. I do notice that 2-star units perform better than 1-star units. Absolutely, of course they do. They're also significantly more expensive to keep up, and I mean that's fine. That's just the way it is. So the light infantry has achieved my stretch goal, which is super, super cool. The line infantry is moving into that central island. I don't have a name for that particular hill, but whatever that island is. And then 35th is kind of sticking it out across the river just to sort of hold the enemy up. But they're not in any kind of a position where, and 35th is the brigade of infantry way the hell to the north. They don't have any hope of kind of holding that attack up. They're just buying time. So the 1,400 to 1,500-ish man brigade is about what I can sort of sustain on my expenditure. And part of that is that I have to replace losses. I talk about I take heavier casualties than streamer X or streamer Y. And this is the outcome. This is the practical outcome of that fact, is that it costs me more to keep the army up as a direct result of the losses I suffer. And I think a lot of that is that if you spread light losses, so every unit in your army suffers 15% casualties or 15 or 20% casualties, you can get away with using more recruits before you lose a star. And if I'm replacing losses suffered in a 2-star unit, so in this particular instance, I'm talking about, I think the Iron Brigade is somewhere in this mess to the south. They've taken like 700 losses at this point in time, and that's about it. I mean, this I Corps has really taken all the heavy losses they're going to take, pretty much. There's a little bit of this like forest fighting, but for the most part, I Corps has taken the brunt of the losses they are going to take already. So having those casualties hyper concentrated means that a portion of the army is trivial for me to bring back to fighting strength. So 2 Corps, 3 Corps, it will cost me practically nothing to get these fighting formations back up to fighting strength. No problem. I Corps, because so many casualties are concentrated into so few units, will require a significant investment in veterans, or I'm going to lose stars. And that's, I think, the big kind of takeaway is I can be a bit more cavalier, weird as it sounds, with a 1-star unit or an army of 1-star units than I can be with a division of 2-star units. And in terms of TO&E and in terms of organizing my army, I have a suspicion the best way to mitigate that risk is not to build divisions of 2-star units. So let's go outside of the structure of this game. If I were establishing a new corps, let's say it's 1863, or a new division. Let's say it's 1863. I'm standing up a new division. I would take a veteran brigade. So we'll use the game's terminology. I would take a 2-star brigade from some other division in the Army and use them as the cadre to, if this was me designing an army, I would take a brigade from another corps in the Army or division in the Army, and I would use them as a cadre to train the officers and NCOs of let's use my division. So, or my division structure now. I've got 6 divisions or 6 brigades in a division. So you've got 1 2-star. You're going to have 1 artillery. You're going to have 1 special, and then you're going to have, that leaves you what, 3 green. So that what I do there is I'm spreading out the veterans so that the dream is that every division is a functionally independent combat unit. And I'm going to experiment with how I build the army and see if I can do that, where I can spread my vets out. And hopefully what that will do is it will allow me to take any division. This will scale up, essentially, the mixed order comp, and apply it now to the corps or divisional level. Because I think at this point in time, you're no longer playing a game where an individual brigade is a super, super meaningful unit. In the early game, like, we're really, really concerned about the operations and maneuverings and the goings on of an individual brigade. And now, like, they matter, absolutely, but I'm fighting with 3 freaking corps. Like, I'm not that worried about what's happening to 1 individual brigade. And the game does a beautiful job of handling how you scale that up. But, it requires kind of a change in your mindset. And I have not, this is a note to myself, I don't feel as if I have successfully scaled how I approach the construction of now a division to embrace the new scope of the war. And that's my personal failing as a leader. I'm still thinking, individual brigades at relatively equal, keeping the experience of a brigade relatively equal across the Army is going to be good. And it's true, but now I need to be thinking about keeping the experience of divisions relatively equal. Now, I say green brigades. Nearly universally, actually I think universally, the 3 combat commands of the Army of the Potomac are entirely 1-star affairs. So 2-star units being farmed out to head, so to speak, a division, I'm probably going to have, even if I do that, a couple of divisions with more than 1 2-star unit. So here we are, we're in day 2, leading into day 2. I have a couple of officers that have been wounded or killed, but because I have a deep bench of existing officers, I can replace them with people. I do so with officers who I feel like are likely to level up or who can handle the load. Again, I keep on trying to get away with basically the lowest level officer I can get away with, that I won't lose efficiency. And the thought process there is I'm doing my damnedest to grow the officers' corps. So I strongly dislike how the battlefield has evolved. This is an engine limitation, I'm pretty sure, that they can't cache where my units were on the battlefield in terms of their coordinates yesterday, which is a shame, because like I've lost a huge portion of the battlefield. I should be back in that central bunker that I was in, operating from, and my troops should be to the south. But because they functionally reset the map, I need to reset with it. So I do. Excuse me. So leave most of the troops in the center. And this is, I'm looking at after action reports and things I would do different if playing this battle again. I actually strongly considered replaying it. And I only stopped because I made a comment in another video early on that I didn't want to do any save scumming or replays to make a perfect playthrough. Because that doesn't do you any good to see that I F up, and it doesn't do me any good because I don't admit or own my failings and the ways that I can grow as a player. So I have way more troops than I need to hold this fence line. I should be going on the offensive, and I don't. I just don't. And the fact that I don't costs me probably 10,000 casualties inflicted. I don't know, 10,000 is kind of a big number. Cost me 5. I could wipe all of this, basically, is what I'm saying. Everything to the south that the Confederates are attacking with, I could wipe. Everything the Confederates are attacking with now in the north, I do wipe. I think maybe one brigade gets out because they retreat back behind trench works and artillery and whatnot, and I'm just not. I make an attempt to attack it with a relatively green cavalry unit kind of leading the charge, and that goes poorly. We'll get to that in a second. We won't. There'll be a few minutes, but so yeah, this is turning into an impromptu discussion about army design in this game, which is great. So the battlefield itself is, it's a really fun battle to play, but then strangely, it's a really to talk about kind of a snooze fest. And I worry that for you watching this, if I wasn't talking about something interesting, and I don't even know if you are watching, but if you were, if it's even interesting to talk about, it's from a discussion standpoint in terms of the individual tactical maneuverings of the brigades, it's I hold my ground, and then when the Confederates are dead, I take the ground that they were currently using, and I try and outflank their position. I don't want to oversimplify the play, but from a big enough perspective, that's basically all I'm doing is I repulse their attacks, and then when I have the opportunity to do so, I seize the initiative and then crush their flank. And that's about it. So instead, there's a discussion I think to be had here about things I could do that I don't. And the play as it occurs in the north should be, for me, a benchmark of what I should be doing. I take losses up here. Okay. Sucks. It is what it is. But I engage a numerically superior Confederate army in open field battle and crush it. Now, they have combined arms, sort of, and that they have infantry and they have artillery. But they don't have light infantry, to my knowledge. They don't bring skirmishers. And they don't have cavalry. I haven't seen cavalry anywhere on this battlefield except for those 3 brigades that attacked from the far south. And 2 of them got shot off by the snipers. 1 managed to sneak around my army, and I got to play, duck, duck, goose with my cavalry that was fun. So what you see kind of up here is I've got 6 brigades of infantry, 3 or 4 of artillery, and then the entire wing of my cavalry. So this is I don't actually know now that I think about it if it's a numerically superior Confederate force, but whatever. I'm getting my cavalry in position to kind of make their flanks very uncomfortable, threaten their sides, sneak if I can, and get that supply wagon The artillery and the infantry work together to kind of blunt the effect of any of these infantry rushes that they're trying to get off. And the end result, the objective of all of this for them was to push across the river, I would presume. Push across the river, attack the Union position in the center from its relatively, by comparison, soft flank, and they just can't do it. They just can't get past the position. One of these brigades looks like it might. I realize, like, oh God, I'm out of position with anything kind of a melee threat, and I send 1st and 2nd Dragoon to go handle them, and that this will happen soon. I think I'm getting ahead of myself. So this will happen soon. The light infantry division is still doing great work, shutting down Confederate flanks, essentially bottling the Confederate army into a lane, which is exactly what I want them to be doing. Yeah, here we go. Here's the Cav trying to shut down this brigade. Other Cav coming out of the woods. Really just kind of fun, dynamic, aggressive cavalry play. And it's the sort of thing I don't get the chance to do as much of as I would like. Because, the battlefields are pretty dense, or because by the time I weaken a Confederate unit, most of the time there's an infantry brigade in place that can just shoot it to death or whatever. So, the last time I got to do like really fun, big cavalry play was, I think, 2nd Bull Run or 2nd Manassas. And that was probably, like, if I'm looking at my playthrough so far, one of my better, if not my best, grand battles in terms of like the cleanliness of the play, the cleanliness of the execution of my original vision, commander's intent, so forth and so on. So my commander's intent, I actually largely pulled off what I wanted to pull off day one. I didn't have a commander's intent for day 2 and take a look at what's happening. I'm just sitting there shooting them from trenches. It's great in terms of force protection. My force pro is good. But look at all these dudes just sitting there twiddling their thumbs. My flanks are secure. My front is entrenched. The infantry is attacking over open ground uphill. My center is realistically not threatened, and I am super focused on this, like, let's be honest, on this sideshow up on the other side of the river. Like, I'm losing it over what was going on over there when there are thousands of casualties waiting to be inflicted on a now largely demoralized and severely beaten down Confederate army in the open right in front of my center. I'm just not doing anything about it. And it's because, I sat down and I thought, like, how do I want to approach this? I took a look at the map. I remembered what I did when I was playing it on Brigadier General, and I was like, okay, so they smashed the crap out of my left flank, and I wish I was able to displace them from the middle, so I go ahead and put together a plan and think about how I can accomplish that. And I just didn't think about day 2. Just didn't think about it. It did not come into my thought process at all. So I got to this basically blind, and, look at what happens. I just sit there and shell them, and all these casualties I could be inflicting, and I'm not. And you win the battle, okay, that's important. Did you maintain minimal losses for your dudes? Okay, that's also important. Have you kept battering down the Confederate numbers pool? Because their manpower will only continue to get out of control if you don't shatter as many units as you can, and if you don't, capture as many guns as you can so you can sell them or alternatively use them, because most of the time the Confederates these days are using Harper's Ferries, which are phenomenal weapons. I will use those until the end of the war, probably. I will be more likely than not equipping a majority of my brigades with Harper's Ferries and 55s still by Richmond, I would imagine. So I get a charge off on this infantry brigade over here with the Cav, which is super fun and exciting. I then realize there's a ginormous brigade of infantry behind trenches ready to shoot me, which makes me very nervous. These guys try crossing the river, get sniped down. But the nice thing is I now get aggressive with my infantry and sort of pen them in. So they've got a river they have to try and cross where snipers are going to snipe them. Or they can take enfilade fire from artillery, or they can try and fight up what the game is telling me is a very sharp or steep. I was going to say steep. A very sharp incline upward. So I would have to imagine they're in a bit of a rock and a hard place. And I'm trying to pen in more than just that one unit and then the supply wagon into that position, or alternatively get some nice melee cav charges off on these brigades. But I pull them back for fear of taking volley fire from whoever these guys are in the trenches, because that would be just devastating. So I finally kind of get it with regard to the center. I start pulling dudes out. I take a volley there. That sucks. Start pulling dudes out to hammer this field army in the flank and start wrapping it up. Because they kind of have to or orientate towards my front, where they're going to get shelled and they're going to get shot by guys in trenches and whatnot. And I love these cav charges. If they ever took this game and dropped it into a Napoleonic engine where I suppose cavalry was still kind of like quote unquote good in melee, oh man, woo! I'm looking forward to that. Actual dragoons like Napoleon style, where they're at that point like just heavy infantry, but they have a carbine. The evolution of the term dragoon and how it came to mean not at all what it's supposed to mean is, whatever. Words happen. It is what it is. Like, it's supposed to be mounted infantry, and it's somehow turned into heavy cav, and then I don't know. Okay. Wipe that unit, wipe the other unit. We start closing in on their flank. Like, there's a lot of good stuff that I'm doing here, and if I'd been doing it, I don't know, five in-game minutes ago, or 5 real-time minutes ago, who knows where I'd be right now in terms of casualties inflicted and how tiny that splotch of red would be. There is zero expectation in my mind that I would be able to cross the river and take the heights. I don't think that is, unless I crushed more of the Confederate army than I do on day one, I don't think crossing the river and taking the heights is practicable or possible, given how day one went. So this is a pretty healthy attack on the center, but it's supported by enough angles. And at these trench works, I know I usually say, trenches are death traps, and they still basically are. But these breastworks are, I moused over it earlier, but the thing is I'm playing this in double time, so you guys probably didn't have a chance to read it. But you get like a melee, I'm not actually sure how it works. You get like a melee buff. And I don't know if it's like a damage reduction from enemy melee kills inflicted, or a bonus to the skill of the melee unit or something. I have no idea how exactly it works, but charging these trenches is expensive and it's hard. So whatever that means, however that ends up breaking down, I'm not really 100% sure. So I'm okay with using these trenches as basically the wall upon which to crush the Confederate army. So I realized too late the potential in the center here for really some strong numbers management. And I do okay, right? Like, I still wipe a bunch of units. I still get the flank in there. I still shatter the crap out of some stuff. Okay, fine. I'll be honest, in the north of the river, I should have taken it right then and there and been like, we're good. This is what I've accomplished. I'm happy. But I got cocky. And I didn't realize I had 15 in-game minutes left. And I also didn't realize this is one of those battles where the battle immediately ends when the clock strikes 0, which I guess makes sense because it's, it's damn near 7 p.m. But, I started thinking, like, I want this forest back here so I can attack the heights from the rear. They have an OP there, an observation post, or possibly even a fire base. I want to hit it from the rear. But then they realize, they've got infantry dug into the north. And so I'm starting to try and formulate a methodology for attacking dug-in infantry in the woods, because I'm going to need to figure out how to do that eventually. This is not it. This kind of works, except that it costs me a cavalry unit. So we got, we're 5 in-game minutes or so away from calling it a day. I managed to finally dislodge this unit, but look at what of a fight they are putting up. Look at how many, it cost me a cav unit. Look at how much infantry, how many casualties they are inflicting in melee. I've got to figure out a better way to launch attacks, and I'll figure it out. Or someone's going to comment about it in the thing, or I'll watch, Aetius' videos or something and get caught up. I really want to watch Aetius Flavius. Search him if you want to watch a Confederate playthrough that is inspiring in terms of oh damn, those are some cool mechanics I want to check out. He's cool as hell, and he's got some very nifty tricks. Okay, so that's the battle. Pretty quickly, I'm going to jump over to the day of commentary. So I'll see you in a second. Oh my goodness. And we are back. Woo! So a little probably after medicine, call it 7 or 8,000. I think more like 8,000 some odd Union casualties to just shy of 50,000 Confederate. So far messier than some of the other playthroughs of this battle I've seen, but man, did I have a blast. Oh, this was a real bloody brawl. This was just horrendous. Just a terrible fight for everyone who was present. Lots of promotions, not surprised. There's a lot of officers just made their name. Wow. I know that I had 3 or 4 wounded. I don't know if anyone died. And because I changed officers in day 2, some of this is not going to come through on this screen here. But I do know that we had a couple get wounded. I want to say 4, and I think 1 died, but I don't remember. Pretty sure 1 died. Anyway, let's take a look at what we captured. A shitload of Harper's Ferries, which sounds about right. I mean, that was the performance I was expecting out of the Confederate Army at the time. Just loads of different kind of varied artillery, Napoleon's ordnance, Parrots, howitzers, a handful of rifles captured. Yep, I took some pretty heavy casualties in one of those 24-pounder units when there was a hole in my line. Man, talk about that fishhook fight, though. Woo, man, that was real touch and go there for a moment. I mean, First Corps is... The rest of the army is basically untouched. Just First Corps really, really caught the brunt of that. But that was Stones River. This was a blast. I don't think that I don't think that we've even come close to paying for the casualties we're going to have to replace, but we'll see. I'm going to let I Corps kind of just hang out, take a breather for a moment. They've definitely earned it. We're going to go ahead and put the fighting back on 2 Corps, maybe even 3 Corps for the lead up into the next fight. What is the next fight? The next fight is Chancellorsville. What's Chancellorsville look like? Ooh. Oh, wow. That is big. So we can use 25-man brigades now. Oh, Chancellorsville is pretty fun, actually. This is a pretty cool maneuver fight, too. A big Confederate army. All right. How are we doing on the campaign screen? So I know towards the very end there I saw one of my dragoon units get wiped. I was experimenting on how to attack entrenched positions, and this was far enough into the battle that I thought, I'll give it a shot. So I charged 2 dragoons in and then 3 infantry right behind them. That didn't go great. So maybe I need to take a look at dedicated melee cavalry. I'm not sure. But we're going to go ahead and put our 2 points into training. Further points into Army Org don't get me anything I care about. They give me an extra corps. I don't care. They give me larger brigades. I definitely don't care. It doesn't give me, actually, no, it doesn't give me larger brigades. I'm at max division and brigade count and then also brigade size thus far. So, yeah. Okay, let's keep that. So we're going to go ahead and use the training points. I imagine we're going to need them. How are the officers looking? Anybody on the bench? No, we just finished a major battle. Okay. So, yeah. I-Corps got just reamed. Just really torn apart. And that's stealth. Yep. Not great. It is what it is. 2-Corps, a lot better off, it looks like. 3-Corps, promotions around the board, pretty light casualties. So really just the majority of the fighting was here in I-Corps, and that is unfortunate. It's unfortunate when the fighting is so concentrated like this, because it becomes very hard to replace these casualties. Like, this isn't going to be that bad. This is, 62, 63 guys, whatever, to get back to fighting strength. Let's find out. Okay, 73, I guess. Yep, 73 dudes to get back to fighting strength. I barely lose any stats. Cost me nothing. However, getting, say, you up to 13th Infantry back to fighting strength is going to basically wipe out all of the progress of that fight. 14th, same thing. 11th, same thing. The Iron and Shiloh brigades are going to be expensive to bring back up. By comparison, the losses are going to be very easy to replace. In 2nd Corps, very minimal losses across the board because their position was basically just defensive. And by the time that they were in place, I-Corps had already sort of blunted the brunt of the Confederate attack. So the casualties were hyper focused in one brigade, and they're just going to be hard to replace. That's all. Let's take a look at what's on offer. A bunch of more Springfields. Also, the Burnside is a decent carbine, and we've got several battles. Supply raid, several battles in which we can get the money needed to build I-Corps back up. So I'm not that worried about it. Army size is mid-50s, and we saw that if we jumped into Chancellors, it was, I think, 57,000, 53,000. But I imagine it will get bigger and bigger in the course of playing out the side campaigns. However, their equipment's getting pretty impressive. And for what it's worth, we did capture a lot of Harper's Ferries. So I'm not going to have to worry too much about what I'm equipping my dudes with. They're going to be fairly well equipped. We've also got reputation for some Springfield 61s. That puts the Army's cash at grand total 6,000 minus battlefield losses. So it should be 23 and change. And then another 1,000. So, I mean, we've lost quite a few to the field. Oh, no, there's another unit. Yeah. So, yeah. That was Stones River or Murfreesboro. Hopefully, I will record good commentary in the actual battle phase. It's looking like that part of it's going to be about an hour. I had a blast with this fight, and I know it was not clean. Compared to some of the playthroughs that this battle where, like, the dude loses, like, I think something Compass lost like 1,000 guys or something, just maybe $3,000. It was insane how light his casualties were. They, especially in the fish hook, they really, really pushed my shit in. And, oh man, I had so much fun trying to fight that off. It was not clean. It was not clean. Oh, come on. Oh, that's so frustrating. They're so close. How are you guys doing? Look at that melee stat. Woo! All right. I'm going on for a little bit now. So we'll clean all this up sometime between now and Chancellorsville. side battles. I'll get the money to do this in side battles. I could probably do it now, given what I've got, but we'll see. And then we'll probably go ahead and fight the side battles with 2 corps. And we'll replace 6th Cavalry. Actually, for the melee stat, melee 100, fire rate 75, fire rate 214. That is significant. Wait, fire rate 200. I mean, whatever, it's close enough. Yeah, let's go ahead and raise.
Yes, sir.
Not Loomis, though. We're not sticking Loomis in a brand new cav unit. That's silly. Buy a major? No, let's just use a light colonel. It's fine.
Yes, sir.
All right. Boop. You know what? A light colonel might not be able to run that efficiently. 350? I don't know. Is this going to have... That's not going to have the durability we need. Oh, never mind. A light colonel can totally run 400, no problem. All right, new cav. Plans. So for Chancellorsville, I can bring 25 men in, I think 2 of the corps, and then the other one, I think I need to shrink it. Possibly I can bring 4 corps. I can. So there's a reserve. But the main corps can be up to 25 people. And at full strength, none of them would be, they would all be 24 corps brigades. So we'll be finishing our cavalry, excuse me, finishing our cavalry divisions in the lead up to Chancellorsville, which may actually be hard. I don't know if I have enough melee weapons. No, I do. That's fine. It won't be an issue. All right. So we're going to do that. We're going to add more infantry generally to all of these units. I think artillery we're probably doing okay on, and then we'll go from there. So this is Fiasco. Thanks so much for sticking this out. That was the Battle of Stones River. I had a hell of a good time, and I hope you did too. I will see you guys in the next one. This is Fiasco, signing out.